When you think of Kenya, there's so many things that may come into mind, but the most prominent things that makes Kenya is the fact that we are aggressive in terms of wanting to be the best in Africa. Aspects such as ethnicity, such as religion, such as political affiliation and all that comes into play when we are using our digital media. That is what makes us different. There are those challenges that people are experiencing, and that is something that we need to talk about in order to see how to solve the digital gap and close it up.
Hello, Africa. You're listening to 1000 African Voices. I'm your host, Aburengwi C, coming to you from our Johannesburg studios. 1000 African Voices is a program that profiles Africans of diverse cultures who have traveled and lived across the African continent and the world. In this series, we will collect and share stories from all parts of Africa. Welcome.
1000 African Voices.
Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mr. Job Mwaura, who will shortly introduce himself to the listeners of 1000 African Voices. Hi, Job.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, and you?
Doing well. Welcome to 1000 African Voices. Can you just introduce yourself to our listeners? Who is Mr. Job Mwaura?
Okay, my name is Job Mwaura. I am a Kenyan citizen and I'm currently living in Johannesburg. I am a doctoral fellow and a teaching assistant at Wits University, and I work in the Department of Media Studies. Apart from teaching, I am currently researching on aspects of digital media in Africa.
All right, so you focus on digital media, and we're going to cover that in some depth. But before all of that, so you said you're working at Wits University, but let's maybe go back in time and understand the person that you are by delving deeper into your background. Where were you born and sort of where did you grow up? What are some of your early childhood memories?
Okay, I was born in Kenya in a county called Nakuru. And Nakuru is basically the fourth largest county in Kenya. Some of the childhood memories that I remember going through was helping my grandfather to graze his cattle and also attending school where my mother was a teacher.
Okay, and which school did you attend?
I attended a school in a town called Njoro. The school name was Kikapu Primary School. But I also joined another boarding school called Michinda Boys Boarding Primary School in Elbagon, which is also in Nakuru County, before I moved to my high school, which is in Eldoret in Uasin Gishu County, and the name of the school is Mother of Apostles Seminary.
All right. Job, when did you move from Kenya to Wits University or to South Africa? How much time did you spend in Kenya versus the time that you have spent in South Africa?
No, I've just been here for a short while. This is my second year. I came here at the beginning of 2017. So I've spent most of my time in Kenya.
Okay, so you're really the perfect person to ask. So before the show, I called a friend just to find out how much they know about Kenya so that I can ask questions that are directed towards answering that question. And one of the questions that she had was, how is Kenya set up in terms of sort of the federal management side? In South Africa, we talk about provinces, and in Kenya, you've already touched on the fact that you come from one county and not the other. How is that whole setup? How many, say, counties are there, and how is the country subdivided?
Okay, with the coming of the new constitution in 2010, Kenya went back to what we call majimbo system or devolution kind of government, where we have counties. And the counties in Kenya currently are 47 of them. They are governed by the leader of those counties is a governor. And then we have other representatives in those counties, such as senators and members of parliament.
Okay. And what has been the reason for that change? Why did Kenya decide to go that route, the route of devolution? What was presented as maybe the advantage of going through a devolution process to create 47 counties?
One of the reasons why Kenya rolled back to devolution was to bring services closer to the common man and also to increase representation. You find that earlier on, before the devolution system, development was centered around central government, and some counties were very underrepresented and underdeveloped. So with the coming of the new constitution and the devolution system, development has been brought closer to the common man in Kenya, and that is the greatest advantage of having devolution in Kenya.
And just maybe going back to yourself, so you've already talked about the schools that you attended.
Yes.
Once you were done with sort of your early childhood education, which university did you go to?
I went to two universities in Kenya, that is Masinde Muliro University and Moi University in Kenya. In my in my first university, Masinde Muliro, I did a Bachelor's of Education degree and I specialized in English and literature, and then did a Master's of Science in Communication and Journalism at Moi University.
And what made you choose journalism? What is it about the field that attracts you?
Okay, when I was in high school and in my primary school, I loved English language. I loved, writing and participating in writing competition, and I wanted to be a journalist. However, after career advice from my teachers and my parents, I decided to enroll for English and literature as a degree, because by that time, there was no journalism as a degree course. There was only diploma. That is why later on, I decided to enroll for a master's course in communication and journalism, which is closely related to English and literature.
All right. And at Wits University as a teaching assistant and a PhD candidate focusing on, I believe it's digital media. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. So why digital media? So you now moved from journalism. You're still in that space in a sense, but you're focusing specifically on digital media. Why that in particular?
Okay, first, studies on digital media are relatively new, especially in Africa. I wanted to understand more the experiences Africans have with digital media, and basically that is what I am looking at. You find that our experiences as Africans is quite different from the experiences of those people in Western world, in the US and in Europe, in terms of using digital media. Our experiences are shaped by the socio-political and cultural settings that are very rich, in Africa. That is what basically my research focuses on.
So you said you've been at Wits for the last 2 years.
Yes.
When do you intend to finish your PhD?
My program is a 3-year program. So by the end of next year, I should be done with the program.
And then what happens after that?
Well, I am still looking, or rather very open to opportunities. Perhaps I would love to go back into research, which I have a wide experience in. Before I came here in South Africa, I was working as a researcher in Kenya. I believe that is something that I would want to go back to and research more on digital media in Africa and create knowledge in that area.
What have you found so far? I mean, digital media has changed the game, so to speak, that in the past, if you wanted to say something or own a publication, you needed a lot of infrastructure so that you can print out your newspapers and spread whatever message you had. But through digital media, you don't need any of that anymore. So in a way, anyone with a cell phone and they are online, they can collect or capture a story and share it widely. Without preempting what you are studying, what have been some of your findings around sort of the media or digital media issues around the African continent?
Well, digital media basically has made things very easy for us. However, even as much as we are enjoying the usage of digital media, there are some communities or some places in Africa where digital media is still not a reality. There are those challenges that people are experiencing, and that is something that we need to talk about in order to see how to solve the digital gap and close it up.
Yeah, I'm quite fascinated actually by digital media because, I mean, the barrier of entry when it comes to that is quite low. As I was saying, as long as you connected and you have a phone that can record and take certain pictures, you can develop a story, which is quite good because it has opened up so many doors and it has allowed us into so many different African stories in particular. So instead of sitting back and waiting for a one narrative being shared by those with the means, we're now able to get so many different African stories, which in a way makes our exposure to knowledge on African issues more wide, so to speak. But maybe to get back to yourself, Job, I'm really quite interested in understanding as someone who grew up in Kenya and now lives in a different country in the form of South Africa. What has been or what have been some of your observations when it comes to similarities as well as differences between your native country of Kenya and South Africa?
Well, first, South Africa is quite a different context compared to Kenya, in the sense that the things that we went through as Kenyans and the things that the South Africans went through, somehow similar but quite different. You remember South Africa underwent through apartheid. Apartheid really changed the mindsets of South Africans. There's such a huge disparity in terms of the rich and the poor in South Africa, and that gap is quite wide. It is very noticeable, unlike in Kenya. Also, the fact that in South Africa there is a huge population of white people is something that is quite different in Kenya. In Kenya, we have such a huge population of black people and very few white people. But living in South Africa is also very fascinating in the sense that South Africa is like a capital of Africa, and everything goes down here in Johannesburg. You find that there are so many nationalities here in Johannesburg especially. You'll find almost all nationalities from Africa here in Johannesburg, and that is something that is quite fascinating. Unlike in Kenya, where you will find very few foreigners over there.
Yeah, I actually know exactly what you mean. So this year sometime I had the pleasure of visiting Nairobi and the surrounding areas, and it was quite interesting to look around searching for those of European descent to learn that the percentage of, say, whites in Kenya is exactly 0.1%, which is not a lot. And then you go to South Africa and learn that the percentage there of white nationals exceeds, it's really anywhere between 10 and 15%. So you write that in comparison, that is quite a large population. Whereas in Kenya, I mean, 0.1% is statistically insignificant. So it's really a very small number.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's actually quite interesting to listen to the observations of someone who comes from a country like Kenya, because you're right, it's very different, but at the same time, there are many similarities. And at Wits University, why did you choose Wits University? I know that you taught at Moi University, I believe. So why Wits? You could have picked any university in the world. Why did you choose the University of the Witwatersrand?
Well, I I love Africa to begin with, and South Africa, provides me with an opportunity to interact with other fellow Africans. And Wits University, being one of the top universities in Africa, has a kind of a different, or rather, such a wide cultural setting in the sense that there are so many nationalities in one place. And the fact that, it is one of the best universities, I wanted to be in that space where I also want to be the best in the best university.
And in terms of, we've talked about sort of the, in a way, political and in a way, cultural aspects of South Africa and Kenya. But when you think of your native country of Kenya, culturally speaking, how do you think Kenya differs from the rest of Africa and the world? Like, what makes a Kenyan Kenyan? What's the key difference in your opinion?
Well, when you think of Kenya, there's so many things that may come into mind, but the most prominent things that, makes Kenya is the fact that we are aggressive in terms of, wanting to be the best in Africa. And that is why we are also excelling in things like technology. Kenya is regarded as a technological hub, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. Also, the fact that Kenya is such a huge top destination in terms of tourism makes it quite different. It attracts quite a number of tourists from all over the world. And to me, that is something that is very, very, very important for us as Kenyans. And also the fact that Kenya enjoys relative peace in the region of East Africa. Our media freedom is quite vibrant, although we are not yet there yet where we want to be. But that is something to be really proud of, because if you compare it with other African countries, especially around East Africa, we are doing very well in terms of democracy. We have a stronger democracy than them, and our media environment is quite vibrant.
And maybe speaking of that, when someone is doing digital media,
Yes.
Sort of trying to think of your curriculum. What are the things that you not only study, but you think about within the digital media context?
As I mentioned before, the sociopolitical culture, the sociopolitical issues and cultural issues in Africa are quite different. So aspects such as ethnicity, such as religion, such as political affiliation and all that comes into play when we are using our digital media. That is what makes us different.
Yeah, I'm really now interested in understanding the impact of moving from your country of origin to a new city and a new country. Yes. What did you find, and maybe what do you still find as challenging for you having moved from Kenya to Johannesburg? Did you find that you settled with ease, or are you kind of still finding your feet and maybe sometimes experiencing a bit of homesickness?
Yes, when I was moving here in South Africa, in Johannesburg, I had heard a lot of stories about crime, about rape and all that. So I was quite skeptical and afraid of what was going to happen to me once I land here. But when I came, I didn't take a long time to settle down. I have been privileged to go to so many parts of Johannesburg, especially. The stories about crime, some of them are really quite exaggerated. I don't think it's that bad, but I'm also, very, very careful wherever I go. I have to think about, how to get home and all that. But it has been generally very, very nice for me, and to settle here was quite easy for me.
And how do you get around the city? What's your preferred mode of transportation?
Well, last year, my preferred mode of transportation was Ubers and Taxifys, but I'm now very comfortable able to use a taxi to move around from here and there, and also to use the GAU train also, maybe when going to Pretoria and other neighboring small towns like Sandton and Midrand and so on.
I mean, the South African taxi system is notorious for many, many reasons. If it's not driving on the yellow lane, it's sort of, what's the word? It's a microcosm of culture within this steel structure with anything between 16 and 20 people packed into one. So if you have taken a South African taxi, and I suppose this is true across the continent, when you find yourself in a taxi, culturally speaking, you really get to be immersed in the culture or the heartbeat of the city that you are in.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting that you say you have used that mode of transport. So I'm quite keen to understand what your experiences have been. Is that something you'd encourage, for instance, someone coming to South Africa to use as a mode of transportation?
Yes, that is quite true. The taxi culture, here in Johannesburg is quite different, but also not so different from what we have in Nairobi, where I've also, spent much of the time there, because the taxi or the matatu culture in Nairobi is also something quite different. And you get to learn a lot of culture or cultural issues when you use that mode of transport. In terms of advising a new person, you just have to know where you are going and which taxi you're taking. Your destination, you have to know your destination, because sometimes if you ask the taxi drivers in English whether the taxi is going to a certain destination, they may be reluctant to answer you. So those are some of the differences that the taxi industry in Johannesburg is like.
And when it comes to food, so I find that when I travel, if I go to a new country, on the first and second days, I'm actually excited about the food. It's great. But on day 4, 5, you start missing some of the food that you're accustomed to. Can you maybe compare the food that you regard as native to you, so Kenyan food, versus the food that you're eating now, assuming that you're eating something different? What have you found are the differences? Like, what were you eating in Kenya? And what do you eat now that you are in Joburg?
Well, the Kenyan staple food, one of the Kenyan staple food is ugali. Ugali is like pap. But the only difference is that pap is softer and ugali is a little bit harder. So coming here and having found that there's maize flour to cook pap or to cook ugali was, easy for me. So I didn't find it difficult to fit in. So I do cook pap or ugali here in Johannesburg, and I can find flour very easily. And I can also find greens like spinach and also beef, But one of the things that I had to carry from home was tea, because I am an addict of tea, and our Kenyan tea is quite different from what we have here in South Africa. So I do take tea, every morning. And also I carry some ingredients from Kenya to make rice dishes such as pilau. Yeah, so that has been my experience in that area.
All right. Yeah, I do know that pilau is it's quite a big deal and a big dish in Kenya. Why is there such a strong tea drinking culture in Kenya? Where does that come from?
I think because we grow one of the best black tea in the world, actually. And that is why so many people love tea. Even though we do also grow one of the best coffees in the world, we don't really love coffee as such, but we do love our tea because we regard it as one of the best in the world.
Yeah, and I can agree. Once again, when you're in Kenya, you get that sense that tea is the preferred warm beverage, as coffee is like, by the way, if you really want to have that, you can. But tea for Kenyan nationals seems to be the preferred beverage. And just in terms of tourist places, and I'm going to ask you more about the tourist type spots that you've seen around Johannesburg. You mentioned that you've been fortunate to have traveled around Johannesburg since the time you arrived. Do you maybe have memories or you recall some of your favorite tourist type spots in South Africa or Joburg specifically?
Yes, I've been to most of the places that tourists do visit in Johannesburg, such as the Apartheid Museum and Soweto. and also Gold Reef City, where we have the mining museum. But if you really want to understand the background or where South Africans come from, I think the best place for you to visit is the Apartheid Museum. That's where you get to see how brutal apartheid was. But also, visiting Soweto is also such a nice thing to do, and visiting Mandela House on Vilakazi Street, and also visiting the stadiums in Soweto, such as FNB Stadium and Orlando Pirates Stadium.
All right. So you've done that. Is football something that you enjoy?
Yes, I do love football a lot. In Kenya, we are very fascinated about, English Premier League more than, our local football league. But here in South Africa, things are quite different because the South Africans love their local league. That is something I do watch often.
Okay, yeah, that's quite good because I find it, and it's quite a tricky thing because even on this show, because we're promoting the African agenda and the African narrative, our best players tend to play in European leagues. So if you want to watch, in inverted commas, the best football, you have to follow where those players are. But at the same time, we want to celebrate our own football on the continent. So when you go to countries like South Africa, you're right, local football is quite big. But when you go to countries like Kenya and Nigeria, you find that the English Premier League in those setups is quite big. But at the same time, for Nigeria, they have hundreds of players playing abroad. In Kenya, when I think of Kenyan players, obviously Victor Wanyama comes to mind as a top footballer from Kenya. I'm yet to truly understand why local football is big in some countries and it's not so big in others. And Job, when you're not doing your PhD thesis, and I don't know if there's ever a time when you're not thinking about the thesis, and maybe you're not watching football, what other hobbies do you have that keep you in tune with Job Mwaura?
Okay, I am so passionate about music, and particularly African music. That is something that I do often. I'm always listening to music. I also play board game called Scrabble. That is something that I also, like. And I also like hanging out with friends and going to discover new places. And also, cooking. Cooking is also a favorite hobby for me.
All right, maybe let's explore your love of music. What typically do you listen to? Who are some of your favorite artists? And maybe some songs that you like?
Okay, I listen to different kind of music. Basically, I can listen to almost anything that is good for me or good for my ears. I'm not very selective. But lately, over the past few months, I've been listening to a lot of African music. I've been listening to especially Selmo Mtukudzi, the daughter to Oliver Mtukudzi, and Sam Mtukudzi. I've also been listening to Oliver's music himself, and also Salif Keita, Hugh Masekela, Lady Smith, Black Mambaza. Also, I've been listening to their music. And also some Kenyan music such as Sauti Sol and Nyashinski. Tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana, sikio la kufa halisikii dawa. Tuko kwa Twitter tunajibizana, tujiangalie bane. Tuko pabaya leo kuliko jana, tusipoziba ufa tutajenga kuta. One of my favorite musicians lately is Selmo Mtukudzi and Sam Mtukudzi.
So you say Selmo is Mr. Oliver Mtukudzi's daughter, and Sam Mtukudzi, is that the son?
Yes.
Are there differences between the music that the kids or the daughter and the son produce versus the music that Mr. Oliver Mtukudzi himself produces? And I haven't listened to Sam Mtukudzi, unfortunately. Do you pick up any differences or similarities between that music and what the legend or the legendary Oliver Mtukudzi produces?
Yes, they're kind of similar, but you find that the ways Oliver Mtukudzi sings is a very nice old-fashioned way. But Selmo and Sam Mtukudzi bring in some contemporariness in their music, and that makes it very, very enjoyable to listen.
All right. Yeah, maybe you can send us a list of some of the music that you prefer. I mean, you've mentioned some great names. Sauti Sol is the name that always comes up. Salif Keita, that is a true African legend. Oliver Mtukudzi, you mentioned Yuma Sekela. That is great music. So you can share with us the list that you love listening to, and we'll be sure to share that with our listeners. And
sure.
Thank you for introducing me, particularly to Selmo and Sam Mtukudzi, because through them, the legend of Oliver Mtukudzi continues. So yeah, I'm actually quite chuffed that Selmo and Sam are into music as well. And maybe, Job, just in closing, as we start wrapping up the interview, what are some of the things that you would like to say? Any words as we close?
I would like to say that Africa is a beautiful continent. We should perhaps do everything or do something or do anything to make it even better. And perhaps we should stop, turning against each other and love each other. Africa is full of very good cultural setting that is quite, unique and different from, the European or American way of living.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as I walk the streets of whatever country I find myself, I greet, I nod, and I say, hello, brother. And it's not something you just say in passing. You say it because you mean it. You look across and you see someone who looks like you, and you know that he is a brother from another mother, or a lady that you greet and you say, hello, sister. It says something, and I don't get that in any other continent but the true African continent. So, Mr. Job Mwaura, thank you for joining 1000 African Voices and for adding your voice to our project. As someone who was born and grew up in Kenya, but now you find yourself at Wits University in South Africa, enrolled as a PhD student and a teaching assistant, focusing on media studies. So I do wish you well and hope that come the third year, you will complete your studies, and whatever you choose to do next, you will make the best of that. It sounds like you will, because you seem to be really focused on what you're trying to do. So from all of us on 1000 African Voices and myself, Aburengwi C, I would like to truly thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate this opportunity.
Take care. And do send us the list of your music so that we can enjoy the kind of music that you enjoy on a daily basis. So please do share the music.
I will do that.
1000 African Voices.
You've been listening to 1000 African Voices. Please join us next time as we bring you yet another African voice. 1000 African Voices is produced by Aburengwi C. Skanich is our sound engineer, with our head researcher Jones Maleka. The intro soundtrack for the show is by the legendary Salif Keita from his 1995 album Forlorn. The song you're listening to right now is by Chronix, and the title of the song is Legend. For more information, including the contact details of our guests, please visit us on our website www.1000africanvoices.com. You can also subscribe to our show on iTunes by searching for 1000 African Voices. We are also available on Stitcher. You can find us as well on Podbean. The only thing we ask of you is that you subscribe to our show by logging on to 1000africanvoices.com and click the subscribe button. That helps us grow. It helps us keep producing and bringing to you more African voices. Until next time, Kungana Africa, and take care.
I'm quite fine being an ordinary person doing what's right. Yesterday at the football game, a little girl asked me my name. She said, "Sir, I've seen you before, tell me, who are you?" I I said I am a legend that you never heard of before. I said I am a lion, but you never heard me roar. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, that means on the ocean of fame I'm an unknown sailor. I'm the percussionist playing with the wailers, the one with the shaker, the mover and shaker. My name wasn't on the front of the paper, but me not cater. Much more than the work is greater. Creation glorifies creator. So all deeds done are in the name of my maker. I am a legend that you probably never hear about. Words from the lion's mouth. I am a hero that nobody celebrates. But if one person remembers my name, give praise, that means I made a change. Story of my life, ordinary person just like you. If you take a look inside, you see the great things that people do. We're out here changing lives day and night, day in, day out. BBC don't show it, CNN don't show it. He's out.